Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Real Science Exchange, the pubcast where leading scientists and industry professionals meet over a few drinks to discuss the latest ideas and trends in animal nutrition. Hi, I'm Scott Sorrell. I'm going to be your host here tonight. Today, we're continuing our series on companion animal nutrition. Got a real fun one coming up. We're going to be reviewing a presentation given by Dr. Kathy Gross from Kansas State University. The title of her talk was Innovating Pet Nutrition, Combating the Pet Obesity Epidemic with New Food Approaches and Ingredients. So, Kathy, welcome to the Real Science Exchange. This is your first time to the pub.
It
so
is.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So why don't you start off? We'll get into the presentation here in a little bit, but I'd first like to know a little bit more about you. So tell me about yourself, and also tell me about your pet.
Oh, yeah. So,
or pets.
I do have multiple pets, but about myself, I received my PhD in animal nutrition from Kansas State University, and prior to that, a master's at Virginia Tech and a bachelor's at Penn State. And then I did a postdoc in human nutrition for a while in Boston.
Right? Interesting.
And then I ended up at Hill's Pet Nutrition and in the research and development area, and so spent the bulk of my career there, 32 years. At Hill's Pet in R&D, creating pet foods, doing research, and just getting a lot of fun products out there on the market.
Cool.
And in terms of my pets, currently I have a dog. Her name is Juniper, and she's a English Shepherd, kind of blonde and white color, looks a little like a Border Collie. And
that's what I have.
On the farm, and she loves to herd, and so she's a fun dog to have around. And then I have a cat. She's currently 3, but my dog actually found her when she was a baby kitten, somehow got kicked out of the nest with the mom, and she was feral and has turned into the most amazing house cat, and she's beautiful.
The dog brought her home?
The dog brought her home, literally, and now regrets every moment of that. But her name's Victoria.
Oh, that's cool. So you got your undergrad at Penn State. Did you grow up in Pennsylvania?
I did.
Is that right?
I grew up in western Pennsylvania.
Okay, very cool. I actually live in Pennsylvania, and I live in the Pocono. So.
Oh, beautiful area.
It is. It really is, yeah. So, we got Dr. Lonnie Hobbs. He's going to be the color commentator today. And Lonnie, tell me about yourself.
Well, I am originally from Texas. Got my undergrad at Prairie View A&M University outside of Houston. And then came to K-State for a master's and PhD. And was fortunate enough to be hired right out of the program as an assistant professor in the Department of Agriculture Economics.
Okay.
My running joke there is I don't know if I can't get rid of them or they can't get rid of me.
So what was your major at K-State?
So agriculture economics,
economics,
with a focus in agribusiness and marketing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Welcome. Well, tell us about your pet.
Gotcha. So right now, I don't have a pet.
Yeah,
and
between
that's
pets.
I have 2 younger kids. That is 5 and 3. So we're waiting for the youngest one to get a little older.
Yeah.
But growing up, I did have 2 dogs. I had a black Labrador. We called him London.
Yeah.
And then I had a boxer and pit bull mix that was Kino, and they were amazing.
Yeah.
Kino unfortunately passed away when I was growing up, and then London, as I went off to college, my mom just kind of found her a new home also.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Good. Well, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the conversation today.
Of course.
In the co-host seat is Nicole Hill. Nicole, this is a 3rd trip, I think, to the pub at least.
It is. It's a great pub to return to. I'm glad to be back.
So welcome back. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm the VP of Strategy and Innovation at Marketplace. We provide strategy, research, branding, and marketing services to businesses in the pet and human nutrition categories, both the B2B suppliers and the consumer brands in those spaces. Part of, I think, our discussion today and what I hope to learn more about is the topics that Dr. Gross presented on, and hope to add some color commentary as well from our next-in research, which is consumer insights research that we do in the pet and human nutrition categories to kind of look at what is the future, what is next in pet. I currently have a 13-year-old German Shepherd mix named Omar, but likewise grew up with a pretty robust menagerie of pets, everything from 3 dogs, 3 cats, bunnies, hamsters, rabbits, a snake, a horse, and my dad is in the aquatic space, and we had 150 fish tanks in our home growing up. So I've been surrounded by pets my whole life and hope to add more to the fold in our home as well. But like Lonnie, when you have little humans, you kind of have to figure out how do we make this all work in this ecosystem we have here. And of course, they're always asking though, when can we get another one? So hoping to add another one soon.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for joining us once again. Kathy gave a presentation yesterday, I believe it was.
It was.
Yeah. So kind of tell us about the presentation. What were some of the key points that you pointed out during the presentation there? Balchem's known as a choline manufacturer, but what people may not know is that we also have a choline product made specifically for pet food manufacturers. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we have a PetSure branded premium choline chloride product is on a non-grain, non-GMO carrier to meet the customer needs that want something that is more cleaner for non-grain products. It's manufactured in our state-of-the-art U.S.-based facilities. There's rigorous quality standards, including a fully AAFCO compliant SQF, FAMIQF, and the AFIA Safe Feed, Safe Food certifications. And Balchem ensures transparency in all that we do throughout regular audits with our qualified clients.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, so being in the pet food industry for a long time, I've seen the rise of obesity happening in our pets. And one thing that, I've noticed is that the industry has not responded as well as I would like them to see in terms of providing products that are for today's pets, that are potentially, less active. They're often neutered or spayed. And so just the lack of choices for pet parents is really evident out there. And so my presentation was about what can we do, as an industry to help pet parents battle the obesity issues in their pets. So whether that's creating new pet foods, putting different ingredients in the pet foods, talking about the underlying issues, health issues that happen in pets, and how can we help pet parents find better solutions, because obviously the epidemic is growing and not getting less. So
Yes.
there's more that we need to do.
So you call it an epidemic. You said you've seen it rising over time.
Yeah.
A couple questions here. When do you think you saw it starting, really? And then what led to it?
Yeah. My background was, Hill's Pet Nutrition, and Hill's had products
The
that were
science
developed,
diet.
science diet and prescription diet.
Yeah.
The prescription diet products were actually created in the early 1940s. One of the first 4 prescription diet products was for obese pets.
Is that
It
right?
was prescription diet RD was one of the 4 original Hill's products. So the awareness of obesity and issue has been around. It's really just started to be tracked probably in the last 10 to 15 years.
Okay.
And there have been studies done looking at every, 2 to 3 years, the percentage of pets that are deemed obese or overweight has increased. And now we're upwards of 60% of dogs and cats in the U.S. are considered overweight or obese.
Humans are overweight as well, and is there anything related there, right? We don't see ourselves as heavy. Maybe the pets just look fluffy. I don't know.
Yeah, so it definitely is a cultural thing. Yesterday I was talking a little bit about the pet microbiome and what we're turning to learn about that. And although I'd like to blame my microbiome on my fluffiness, it definitely may have a role, actually. And because we share this household with our pets, are we sharing this microbiome that either the pet or ourselves are really kind of sharing things that
Interesting.
are, allowing us to maintain that level of obesity.
Yeah, that's interesting. We were talking offline before, almost had a total podcast before we came on board, but we should have recorded that. But one of the things we were talking about is maybe do we really understand or whether our dogs and cats are fat or not, and then how do we determine whether they are or not? Is that something we rely on our vet for, or should we educate ourselves? Do you have any thoughts related to that?
There are definitely methods to be able to evaluate, the body composition of a pet, and they call it body condition scoring.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot like, feeling over the ribs and looking for those fat pockets at the back of the tail or, in the chest. And there's also, of course, ways to evaluate the pets more scientifically with, DEXA scans and things like that. But pet owners can do it at home.
Yeah.
They can keep track of things. One of the tips that I typically give pet owners is if they use, say, a harness and they're starting to notice they have to let it out by a link on the harness, or, they have to expand the collar, that's an indication that your pet is gaining weight and that you need to pay more attention to how you're feeding them.
Yeah. So I think I was sharing with you that my background is livestock and livestock evaluation. I was on the Ohio State judging team, and I learned to actually be able to feel the fat on animals. And if they feel soft, they're probably a little bit fat, right? And so that might be the first indicator. Sorry, I'm dominating. I should have told you guys ahead of time that you've got to butt in, right? And you can't be polite here, Lonnie. You got to just jump right on in there.
So I'm curious on that point, Kathy. It sounds like the best way to identify if your pet is obese is getting more of a physical approach. I'm noticing in my surveys a lot of the pet owners do more of a perceptive approach to identifying if their pet is obese or not. Does my pet look fat? Does it not? Instead of getting more into DEXA scanning, getting more into feeling the ribs, etc. What are some ways that you think that we could maybe educate the pet owners about those different types of scans that would be more beneficial than just perceptual scans?
Yeah, so the perception thing is actually, a good way because there are certain parts of the body that you can look at. One of the cool things that's coming out is using artificial intelligence and using some of the visual ways of looking at a pet, and then using artificial intelligence to be able to kind of categorize that pet. So that's some really new tools that are potentially available. In the future, there might be an app on the phone that a pet owner can use and just scan their pet, and it'll give them that body composition.
Is it able to do that regardless of what the coat looks like?
That's the trick.
Got it.
So training those models to look for certain points in a pet, no matter whether they have long hair or short hair, whether they're short-legged or tall-legged, anything like that. So the technology is getting better, and that's something that I'm looking forward to
that's
having.
Cool.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think I'd be curious about is we know from our next in research that about 15% of dog parents in the prior 12 months have purchased a either food, treat, or supplement for weight management, and about 13% of cat parents have. Those are the folks that are taking action with a specific need state in mind, weight management. But as you mentioned, not every pet parent is great at identifying that. Maybe not every vet is pointing it out to them, or if they are pointing it out to them, what steps are they taking? I'm curious, do you know approximately how many pets, percentage of pets in the U.S. are considered overweight or obese?
Great question.
Yeah, so the latest survey, the Association for Prevention of Pet Obesity, just published results, and it's about 60% of dogs and cats are considered obese or overweight. A lot of pet parents do know that, though. They know that obesity and overweight is an issue. The really interesting thing, though, is when you ask them about their specific pet, they say their pet's at ideal weight, right? But then on the flip side, there's more than 50% say they've tried to help a pet lose weight. So there's a lot of conflicting information, and I think there's some reluctance to admit that you may have a fluffy pet.
Yeah, well, and I think to our earlier conversation, how they're choosing to address that issue. Is it by portion control with their food? Is it modulating treating with feeding and managing that? Is it purchasing a diet specifically designed for weight management? Is it taking them on more walks, longer walks, getting, extra exercise in their pet's day? Obviously, there are a lot of different actions a pet parent can take to address that challenge, but I think it's really interesting to your point. Like, okay, I recognize this is a problem for pets out there, but not for my pet.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, like that first step is essential to taking the action necessary. When at the end of the day, what does every pet parent say they want? Whether you ask a person on the street or in a survey, it's they want a healthier, happier, longer life for their pet. It's quality of life, it's longevity. And ultimately, weight management is essential to that. And I think, there is that awareness gap between awareness for people's own pets and ability or willingness or awareness of the actions they might need to take. What do you think needs to be done to close that, in addition to helping people identify in their own home, like what does their pet need and how to evaluate their individual pet's body composition? What other insights do you think could help pet parents be more informed about that and the role that it plays in their pet's quality and longevity of life?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is that pet owners don't always take into account all the calories that they're feeding their pet. And I think some of the survey you've done, Lonnie, would say that as well, is that when you're talking to a pet owner, you really have to ask them very specifically about what the day in the life of their pet looks like. So walk me from the beginning to the end. And there's many times that you'll find that, there's a little treat given here. The children do this with the pet and, clean up around the high chair. And, then, so-and-so feeds the dogs on Tuesday and Thursday, and they don't always use the right cup. And then you start asking about what that cup looks like. And is it really a measuring cup? No, it's a big gulp cup from 7-Eleven is what they use. And so when you get into the specifics, you can start to identify those areas where those extra calories are coming from, and then give them real concrete ideas about what to do.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Lon.
Oh, that was our approach to a pet obesity management study that we conducted, just looking at the feeding management habits. And it brought up a good question that we're looking to further research. Yes, we have owners that are purchasing healthy weight and weight management products, but what good does that do if you're still overfeeding from a calorie standpoint or the amount that you're providing?
Yeah.
And we talked about the difference in cup sizes. We talked about the difference in adjusting how much you're feeding based on actions such as exercise, etc. But what we found from our study, there are some opportunities for pet food companies to take advantage, but a lot of what's needed is still consumer education. Education on how to manage your pet properly. How do we reduce the amount of calories that we're getting?
I think one of the essential components is those conversations that pet parents have with their veterinarian. Obviously, vets are the most trusted source of information among pet parents. It's who, more than anyone, pet parents turn to when they're interested in health information regarding their pet. And I know, I'm grateful to our vet for giving us some really practical applications. When we've had my dog since he was a puppy, and he was born with a genetic condition that presented as hip dysplasia. So it was essential from the time he was a puppy to make sure we were managing his weight, because while hip and joint health is one of the top 3 need states that pet parents report, weight management, though, isn't necessarily prioritized in that same way. Right. And I remember he said, when people feed their pet and they, give the cup and it has a little heaping top on it, that's like if you had Thanksgiving dinner every day. So like Thanksgiving dinner on Thanksgiving, you're probably okay if you're eating practically
Right.
on all the days around it, and you have those occasional events and celebrations and whatnot. But when you're doing that every day, there's a negative impact
Sure.
to your health as a human. Likewise for a pet, if you're giving them if this is their portion size they're supposed to be getting, but you're giving them that heaping cupful or big gulp cupful,
Right.
then that becomes a persistent issue. And I remember his recommendation was to get one of those gas station cups or convenience store cups and make sure you had the exact equation for the kcals your pet needs, which I got from my vet, and based on the food we were feeding, he said measure that out, weigh it, put it in that cup, cut the cup at the flat top of where that food is and use that cup as your portioning. If you're not going to get out a scale every day, like he's like, that's a really consistent way to make sure you're not overfeeding, because that
Right.
little extra heap can turn a everyday meal into a Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
And when you multiply that by all the feeding occasions, 2,
Right.
sometimes 3 times a day for folks, it really can have a multiplying effect. And when you think of the issues that people recognize with joint health and mobility and daily wellness, that to me is one of those critical conversations that pet parents need to be having with their vet and with other experts in the space, so that they can make those choices for their pet to really elevate their health and happiness in
Yeah.
all aspects of life.
Yeah, and I think those are great recommendations from your vet. And all vets, know about weight management, but sometimes the conversation is difficult to have. You might have an overweight pet owner that's there, and it's difficult to approach that conversation. Those of us that are pet owners feel like our pets are our children. And so when a veterinarian is saying your pet's overweight, oh gosh, I'm a bad mother, and it gets to be a difficult conversation. But I think, looking at things objectively and saying, overweight and obesity is really a disease, and so that disease is something that can be managed and treated. The other thing you mentioned about is where are the source of calories and extra calories. A lot of people do treat, they might top their foods, and they don't always recognize those calories that come with those things. And a lot of times if you're sitting there in the evening and maybe you're having some cheese and crackers and you have a little cube of cheese, and you don't think much about that as very many calories. Well, if you've got a 20-pound dog, a little cube of cheese is a huge amount of their daily calories. So it's about scale and understanding, the value of those calories, and trying to balance that across the day and across the week, so you're not seeing excesses like eating a Thanksgiving meal
Yes.
every single day.
Yeah, well, and when we look in the human nutrition space, obviously there's a lot of talk and hot topics around GLP-1 agonists right now. In our food survey, we noticed that 8% of U.S. adults report currently being on a GLP-1 agonist for whatever reason. And then also on top of that, those who are consistently participating in a weight management program or weight loss program, whether it's through, apps or nutrition tracking or working with a nutritionist, et cetera. And I think when we talk about the persistent trend that's been, going on for more than a decade of the humanization of pets, I think as people continue to develop their own self-awareness about their own health and wellness, my expectation is that will start to transfer to pets. But I agree that it's still something that when you get feedback about your pet's wellness that feels directly tied to your caretaking for that pet, it is very much like it can feel like a shameful thing, like, oh, I didn't serve my pet well when I thought I was.
Right.
And that is a hard, a hard, hurdle to overcome.
Yeah.
I think also the nutrition aspect in the human side, we're so much more aware than even 10, 20 years ago of our macros and what is actually in that cube of cheese.
Right.
Not everyone, but certainly there are pockets of folks that learn about that, prioritize that to manage their own health and wellness. And we don't really have as much of that in the pet space. Like, how often are we plugging in, oh, I fed my pet, in a nutrition tracker,
Right.
this, and this today. And while there are those options with certain food programs and things like that, it's just there's a lack of access to nutrition scientists among companion pet owners that, for instance, Scott, in your realm in the production animal space is just part of, running a solid, efficient, productive operation where the animals are well cared for and very productive. In the companion pet side, you have your vet, which, in the human space, our doctor. But in the human space, we have a lot more access to nutritionists and nutrition information that companion pet parents don't really have, I think, that direct access to, unless they're lucky to be, have a member of their household or their family or friends group that brings that perspective.
Yeah, and
to
that
the
goes
table.
back to my point is it would be great to have more choices for pet parents out there so they don't have to be an expert in nutrition, that there's a lot more choices in lots of different brands across lots of different formats that have more managed calorie levels. They have some nutrition that helps pets that we know are going to be gaining weight or, predisposed to gaining weight, that helps them avoid that. So, we have products out there that, you don't have to wait till a pet is overweight in order to find a product, which is basically what you find out there now. And so my point is, if we have 60% or more of pets that are overweight, and the majority are likely to become, pet food makers should think about designing products for those pets. And some of the regulations could be updated to help that as well. Because right now, AAFCO, who is the authority that everyone follows for kind of formulating pet foods, only has recommendations for growing animals and adults. There are no nutritional guidelines for pet food companies to follow to create foods that have controlled calories or low fat or added fiber and balancing all the rest of the nutrients that they need. So, the data is out there, but it's not as easily accessible for pet food makers to find and formulators. So it would be great if we could have more of that.
And I think that shows an opportunity in the market. Some of the implications from our study were suggesting maybe prepackaged foods, pre-portioned foods, where it's kind of easier to eliminate the overfeeding from amount standpoint, but also foods that are specialized for different types of dogs, spayed neutered conducive foods.
Right.
But it also brings up another point that we're looking into is the acceptance of it. So you talked about the veterinarians making a tough decision or having a tough decision because of how the owner will receive it. You also mentioned AI and AI providing an objective approach. My question is, how will the owners receive that? If it's hard coming from a veterinarian, if I get it from AI technology, it's easier for me to say, well, you don't know. Yeah, you have the information, but who are you? You don't know my specific situation. But then another point that we're looking into is you both have mentioned some great numbers of 60% of households reporting that they have a pet that's obese. You reported that 15% is actively buying a healthy weight or weight management product. What about the rest of the owners? So we provide products that are conducive for health, but there's a small percentage of owners that actually care and actually focused on buying those products. So what we're looking at from the social science and economic standpoint is how do we reach the other masses that either aren't aware or do not even care? Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was wondering, right, we had a conversation yesterday about the consumers and a large percentage of the consumers willing to invest more in extending the life of the animal, right? Well, this is kind of the opposite, right? Can you talk a little bit more specifics about what are some of the implications of obese animals and what it does to longevity and health and those kinds of things?
Yeah, there's definitely research that says obese animals have a shortened lifespan.
Yeah.
And also the quality of life. And you talked about, your pet, having some mobility issues and born that way. And so, you're going to find that quality of life is declined. But there's a lot of comorbid conditions that happen with obesity. So we have osteoarthritis, we have diabetes, we have cancer, urinary tract issues, bladder stones, kidney stones. All are very serious comorbid issues that happen. Even allergies, which is a very prevalent problem now, is tied into obesity. And it goes to the underlying issues that happen in pets that gain extra fat. Extra fat isn't just inert tissue. It's very active metabolically. And that active fat adipose tissue produces what are called inflammatory cytokines. And inflammatory cytokines are bad things. And they cause a lot of oxidative damage, and so you get this bad cycle of oxidation and inflammation. And inflammation is really the root of a lot of health conditions that are, going to even be worse than what it appears to be as a pet, as obese. So yeah, it's something that we might look at in the future, is talking about how can you extend the life and health and the happiness of your pet. Rather than avoiding obesity, let's make it more the flip side, the positive side of things. So promoting products that, help with a healthier life overall.
I'm curious about, if there's correlation between pet obesity and the age of the pet. So as like with humans, and hormonal changes can affect things like that. I'm curious how many people are, feeding their pet. So many feed their pet the same brand, the same food that they fed them, since they became a pet parent. And I wonder if pet parents are modulating or not, or reducing the calories as their pet ages, or if they're just continuing to feed them what they've always fed them. Or even, we talk about how pet parents are really multi-product feeders today, where it's not just your bowl of kibble in many cases. It's maybe part kibble, part wet food, part topper, supplement, or whatever. And that combination of things, each of those carries a different, calorie concentration. And so while that bowl might look equally full as you had fed when it was just kibble, you might be feeding your pet more calories than you realize. And when we think about pet parents and that education piece, I'd be curious, one, like, are senior pets more predisposed to obesity? And two, I haven't really seen any proactive education on that in the pet food space for consumers.
There's definitely underlying and key points in the journey of a pet's life that you need to be aware of. So typically pets are spayed or neutered when they're relatively young, right? So they might be 6 months, 8 months, a year old when they're spayed or neutered. That's an inflection point when we're changing their metabolism, because we're changing the hormonal aspect of that animal. And so they become more at risk for obesity at that point. So that's a really critical point for pet parents to pay attention to, how they're feeding their pet, how much they're feeding their pet, the calories and where they're getting those from. Adult animals, if they don't have any major health issues, it's just about maintaining the right amount of calories to maintain their body weight, but also their body condition, and that balance between muscle and fat. And what happens as pets age is that there's a little bit of a shift in the ability of older pets to digest food, but there's also changes that happen with aging where you have loss of lean muscle and therefore relatively more body fat as they get older. And so a pet may not change much in their body weight, but they're changing their relative proportions. And in order to maintain that muscle, you need to feed a little bit differently. It's not just about feeding more food, it's about changing the composition of that food. And that's what, if you are looking at scientifically what needs to happen, there's definitely different nutritional requirements across a pet's lifespan. And you don't see, again, a lot of products that have, definitive nutritional profiles for each of those life stages, but they do exist. And to be optimal nutrition, you should be switching products. A lot of people like the, all life stages products because I can feed the same thing from beginning to end, but that isn't really optimal nutrition for a pet.
And speaking from a sample standpoint, even in our study, we saw a higher correlation with pet obesity and older pets. We saw a higher correlation with pet obesity and smaller dog breeds. And these are questions that it's prevalent that we must educate the consumers about, because if not, as Kathy said, we have to understand how do we make our pets healthy, happy, and that may be adjusting what we feed. But Kathy, you make it sound as if our pets are very similar to us. As I get older, I bring on more body weight also.
I agree.
Sure.
You're still a young man, dude. Wait till you're my age. Kind of speaking of that, I kind of got a bit of an off-the-wall question, right? But I recently bought a scale that measures body composition.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm wondering, and then in production livestock, we're able to measure eating behavior, dry matter intake, activity. So how far away are we of having devices on our animals or having our animals walk across a scale that weighs them, that measures their body composition, that's tracking their age, sends this data off to the pet food company, and every day you get what you need and how much to feed to that animal. Sounds like a product.
I know. Great idea.
like
Cut that out.
I think
want to
we
use
need it.
this.
Yes.
I think I saw a presentation yesterday from someone who their technology platform was acquired by Ollie, Fresh Pet Food.
Yes.
And they were talking about how part of the reason they did so was so they could track and optimize their pet's nutrition.
Yeah.
And I don't recall all of the factors, but some of it was even like sending photographs in of your pet and their waist, and
Yes.
seeing how their, that their outputs evolved as their nutrition was optimized. So I think there are some, interesting aspects of that. From a consumer lens, I always, there are always really interesting opportunities to optimize and improve. The two questions, though, that tend to be the biggest barriers are how much does it cost and how convenient or inconvenient is it? And when you start having to add extra steps to your pet's daily routine or your daily routine, even if it's only 2 minutes a day, it sounds like not a lot, but when you think of all the decisions you make to get out the door in the morning, and if you have small, kids in the household, the
Exponential.
steps to take, get them out the door in the morning, and to get your pet cared for, and then you add in those other things, it can really be a big hurdle to overcome. Not insurmountable, but something I think to consider. And do pet parents feel like they get the value out of the effort and expense and energy they put into it? And so I think it'll be interesting to see how those types of programs are adopted, to what degree, and how much advocacy, frankly, and support they get from the veterinary community, because at the end of the day, people do ask their vets, what do you think about this? Is this necessary? And, some of the recommendations that come from there might reinforce or, limit the adoption of things like that. Right. I think it's also something that you mentioned, Lonnie, was the smaller dogs and their predilection to being overweight. One of the things that it made me think of is, okay, we have such an emotional connection with our pets for the most part. Not every household, some dogs are working dogs. Some dogs people think of like, my dog is a burden to me, and that's unfortunate, but there is a portion of pet parents that applies to. but so many do think of our dogs as a member of our family, our
Yes.
best friend, a lifelong companion, for the life of their pet, and they want to extend that life. One of the questions we asked in our recent survey was, which of the following applies to your dog? And one of the statements was, my dog begs for food. And I don't have the numbers top of mind, but I would venture to guess that the correlation between those that say my dog begs for food and those who have a weight management need is probably, there's probably a positive correlation there if I had to guess.
Of course.
And so I imagine that some of it too is like, do you have a very food motivated dog or cat for that matter?
Yeah.
One of the things we're seeing on the cat side are the continued growth and interest of the lickable cat treats.
Right.
So the stick packs that have
Yep.
like a mousse or a pate kind of texture in them. And my opinion on it is like, okay, well, dogs have a very emotional connection with treating occasions. Cats can certainly have that, but sometimes it's okay, I got my treat and now I'm going to go do my own thing. So those lickable treats give a prolonged interaction between cat and cat parent that provides that like closeness and proximity and emotional connection and positive reinforcement. And I'd be curious, with treating occasions or with feeding from the table, whether accidentally or on purpose, how much the pets that beg for those, treats or food or whatever the case may be, that emotional connection of, oh, they're wanting this and I want to please them and I want them to love me as much as I love them, and how much food and treating plays a role in that emotional connection we have with our pets and how we lean into that as pet parents.
Yeah, I know that for a fact that, overfeeding and that perception of pet parents of depriving their pet or not being able to treat their pet is a huge barrier. But there are things that can be done. There can be lower calorie treats. There can be foods that help a pet feel more full so they're less likely to beg. So there can be technology solutions to that. But yeah, it's a big, interacting factor. You don't have a person saying, oh, I love this. A person is looking at their pet and their behavior as their indication.
And I saw a study, I can't remember if it was an actual study or podcast, where a guy was talking and he said, we basically train our dogs and train our pets as similar that we train our kids. We teach them that begging is good. And he talked about the level of begging where if a dog come to me and I'm eating a steak and my dog starts whining and whining and whining and he increases his volume over time, the volume that he then receives the steak is the volume that he starts with the next time he starts to whine.
Oh yeah.
So understanding that we're training those habits. So I do think that's something that we have to take into consideration also. And back to your technology or your technology question, I don't think we're that far off. My fiance told me about a ring. I don't know the name of it, but it's a ring that tracks the Aura ring. Yes, it tracks all of your health information. I think they said it even has saved lives where someone is mid-sleep and their heart stops beating properly or something, and it sends a notification to their phone. If we're getting that in the human space with a ring, I don't think that we're far off from getting that with a collar.
Yeah. Well, my watch does a lot of that.
The watch does the
mine
same
too.
thing. I don't think that we're that far off, and forgive me if we already have collars that do that. But I think it kind of taps into what you were mentioning as well of it then reduces how much I have to do to even manage.
And I think that's a great point. The wearable technology does provide a more convenient way to collect data and insight information about your pet's health. I think on that front, it's always going to be the price question and barrier. And there are, folks across income brackets that there is no limit to what they're willing to spend on their pet, no matter how it affects their own, lifestyle choices for themselves. But obviously for things to scale and, from a volume standpoint, price plays a bigger
Absolutely.
role,
And
but I
it-
think you
and
make
it-
a great point with that.
Yeah, and it goes, even beyond sensors that you would put, say, on a collar. When you think about how connected our homes are becoming, right? There's potential that you can have, feeding devices that are connected to the sensor and offer the right amount of calories for that particular pet, for the amount of activity that they did that day or that week. And so as things become more connected, people are more used to, having those kind of that kind of information on their phone, and some of those apps that then directly connect to other services like a veterinarian or their groomer or whatever other services they're looking for, ordering their pet food. That is going to kind of bring this whole ecosystem together, which I think could aid pet owners in a lot of different ways. So they're not just relying on their own information or talking to their neighbor about it. They're getting actual, real, valuable input by all the different sensors that can be in their life.
I think I'd love to have a podcast on that.
That would be great.
Exactly. This has been a great conversation. I think we're getting to the end. Want to ask you guys, think of a couple things that you think that the audience should take away from this conversation. Just a couple key points. And Nicole, if I can start with you down there, would you mind sharing that with the audience? Dr. Alton, Balchem's created this brand new product called Structuring and Forming Technologies. Tell me a little bit about that.
This is our PetSure branded technology that helps processors and manufacturers utilize and transform protein in such as organ meats and plant-based proteins into treats and finished products. It is suitable for a wide range of animal-based and plant-based proteins. What it does is helps increase the product durability through the process. It provides consistent texture and the quality while providing processing flexibility and avoiding some CapEx expenditures.
There's been quite a bit of research at Auburn University, and one of the things I was intrigued by is that they were able to take liver, which basically liquefies when you grind it or whatever and process it, and you were able to take this technology and put it back together and create a sellable product. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Sure. So this is a combination of calcium lactate and sodium alginate. Now, as you know, we are experts, and one of our core competency is microencapsulation. So we're able to control this protein cross linkages by microencapsulating the calcium lactate, and then we're able to deliver the cross linkages at the specific time in the processing. What we have found is we can start using more of these traditionally hard to handle protein materials such as meat slurries, organ meats, plant-based proteins, even fish, insect proteins that really you kind of limited into the amount you can put into a product because you're not able to get a cohesive product at the end.
So, Eric, so it's a great technology. Tell me, have we had any success stories with it?
Sure. So recently, a customer was having issue with excessive breakage in some of their treats, and they wanted to look at this technology and investigate ways of decreasing the waste material or fines or broken pieces in their process and increase a more sellable product. So by leveraging this technology, they were able to decrease the waste, decrease fines, decrease breakage, but end up with a product that has a greater consumer appeal, which then leads to further consumer or customer loyalty and repeat purchases.
Yeah. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, I think one of the insights that Dr. Gross and Dr. Hobbs pointed out so well was the awareness of the issue for the broader pet community is not the same as people recognizing the issue in their own home with their own pets. And so bridging that awareness gap is going to be essential to making weight management more adopted and accessible to the large proportion of pet parents that really could benefit from that with their dogs and cats.
I think for me, weight management is an issue that, if prolonged, can cost us, both from increased veterinarian costs, but also, as you said, a reduced lifespan of our pets. So in order to make sure that we get as much time with our pets that we have,
Yeah.
we need to watch and manage the pet's weight.
Yeah, great
That's
comments.
good.
Kathy,
Yeah.
any key takeaways?
Yeah, what I would say is that, even though the pet owner is core to making sure their pet gets fed appropriately, it's going to take more than just education of the pet owner, right? We need to have other tools available. We need to have, pet foods that are designed appropriately. We need to have more research out there to help understand what really causes those kinds of issues in pets and how can we better combat those. So I think it's a lot of fronts. We need help in battling this issue.
Yeah, great comments. It's been a great podcast, folks. Appreciate you joining us. Appreciate your expertise. To our loyal audience out there, thank you once again. Appreciate you. Thanks for joining us here. We hope you learned something. I hope you had some fun, and I hope to see you next time here at the Real Science Exchange, where it's always happy hour, and you're always among friends.
We'd love to hear your comments or ideas for topics and guests, so please reach out via email at anh.marketing@balchem.com with any suggestions, and we'll work hard to add them to the schedule. Don't forget to leave a 5-star rating on your way out. You can request your Real Science Exchange t-shirt in just a few easy steps. Just like or subscribe to the Real Science Exchange and send us a screenshot along with your address and t-shirt size to anh.marketing@balchem.com. Balchem's Real Science Lecture Series of webinars takes place on the first Tuesday of every month, with the top research and nutrition topics that will impact your business. We also include small ruminant, monogastric, and companion animal-focused topics throughout the year. Visit balchem.com/realscience to see the upcoming topics and to register for future webinars. You can also access past webinars and search for the topics most important to you.